We are here with the your honorary Yasar Yakis, former foreign minister of Turkey. Previous positions including permanent delegation of Turkey to NATO, co-founder of the Justice and Development Party, political party in Turkey, foreign minister in 2002, and you led Turkey's bid to start accession talks to the European Union. And here we have a few questions for you on this annual occasion for the Academy of Cultural Diplomacy. Your Excellency, considering your previous experience working in NATO, what role do you think the organization could play in solving the Syrian crisis?
I think that the role of NATO in the Syrian crisis has become all the more important after the downing of a Russian fighter plane by Turkey. Before that, NATO could have played a slightly different role, but now after the downing, the two sides became almost rival of each other, because as a normal outcome of the crisis, NATO allies sided with Turkey. The Atlantic solidarity required it, and now Russia and NATO are competing rather than cooperating in the Syrian crisis. So it has become slightly more difficult. But NATO still could do a lot of things, at least to persuade Russia that by colliding in the Syrian theater will not do good to either side. NATO is capable of doing it, and Turkey's proximity to the crisis area is an advantage. One of the NATO's biggest air base is very close to the Syrian border in Turkey, and there are other air bases, again, constructed with the NATO infrastructure money, so they are all on the Syrian border. Turkey's contribution as a NATO member and as NATO as a whole may see that by colliding or by competing in the Syrian theater would not contribute to the advantage or the national interest of either side. For this reason, NATO should not try to escalate the military competition, but should try to persuade Russia that a military confrontation between the two will exacerbate the Syrian crisis and will do harm to both NATO and Russia.
And to what extent do you think cultural diplomacy can be used as a tool to better the current situation in Syria?
There are several areas where cultural diplomacy could play a very positive role, but the most important one is the refugee crisis. Because refugee means that a person leaves his or her own environment, the place where he was grown up, the place where his house is, his relatives are, his job, his factory, and everything, economic interests were there. If he leaves this place, he doesn't do it for pleasure. He does it because he has to choose between his own life and being refugee. And when you become refugee, you go to an environment that you do not know of. First of all, on many cases, you don't choose your destination. You apply to be admitted as refugee to different countries, and if these different countries admit you, choose you, or select you as potential refugee, then you will go to that country, and you will live there. You will join a society whose rules, whose traditions you do not know. Different religion, different environment. Even if you are in the same religion, in the same sect, It is different this mentality. And the Middle Eastern mentality varies a lot from the European mentality. So there, the cultural diplomacy becomes the most important factor to facilitate the accommodation and getting used to the new environment. This is valid for both the receiving community and the refugee community. Perhaps cultural diplomacy is more important for the receiving community because the refugee has other priority. He has to feed himself. He has to find a school for his child, and he cannot spare time to try to understand what is the culture of the country where I am going to immigrate. Whereas the country, the receiving country, is a stable country. Everybody's life has gained stability, so they can spare more time to understand what is the culture of the person who joined us as a refugee. So the bigger part of the task is in the receiving community rather than in the refugees. But both have to make big efforts to understand each other, and perhaps the graduates of this institute, Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, may play a very important role in their home country where refugees are coming in, and perhaps lead the initiatives in their society to make more efforts to understand the culture of the incoming refugees, and also mixed up with the refugees to tell them that the refugees also should make efforts to understand the culture of the new host country. If this is not done, these refugee communities will become introverted societies, like ghettos. We have seen this with the Turkish community in Germany in 1960s. The first bunch of the Turkish workers, when they come to Germany, they were mostly illiterate and with no job experience. They did not speak German, and German society could not absorb them easily because at that time neither the Turkish authorities nor the German authorities thought that these people were going to stay for a long time in Germany. They thought that after having earned some money, they would go back to their village in Turkey and continue their life there. This did not happen. So, upon which Turkish community in Germany became an introverted society to close up in between themselves. If this happens in the refugee communities in the European countries, then all the problems that it entails will also surface. So in order to prevent this, cultural diplomacy is the best vehicle to be used to accommodate them, to make their perhaps admission to the country and their liking their life easier in the society. It is the cultural diplomacy which will be the most influential vehicle.
And you have such a vast experience in the field of diplomacy. What do you think defines your legacy as a diplomat?
Actually, you learn from the mistakes that you make and from the good examples, success that you watch around. When you serve 40 years in a profession, of course, you believe that you could contribute with this knowledge to the solution of tensions in between the countries. Diplomacy is an art of avoiding the conflicts, and when you want to avoid a conflict, you shouldn't expect that you should persuade the other side exactly to the way you are perceiving things, and the other side also should not try to persuade you that their way of approach should be admitted by both sides. We have to try to find out what are the commonalities in the approach of the two sides. And if there are 100 questions that could be in the relations in between two countries, if there are 5 or 10 which are common, where the interest of both sides is on the same direction, you have to start with this and build upon it and enlarge the areas of commonalities, because when you get in touch and you work together, you learn what is the mentality of the other side, and then you expand your understanding, common understanding, to other areas. So the two sides should not focus on their differences, but on the points on which they can agree.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for taking your time to answer our questions, and we hope you'll continue to have you with us during the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you.